few hours, Kenya will be launching her global campaign for a non-permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. This is after Kenya was endorsed by 37 of the 54 AU member states at a session in Addis Ababa. Well, to win the seat, Kenya will have to get the support of 2/3 of the UN member states in a campaign the Foreign Affairs CS Monica Juma is leading. Well, she sat down with Mark Masai just before leaving for the UN headquarters.
This particular vote is not an end to itself. There's more in terms of actualizing that particular seat. What lies ahead?
Yes. Most pleased because we are at a crucial historic point, certainly for the nation, and more importantly for the role that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has to play in terms of delivering our bid to the United Nations Security Council for the tenure of 2021-2022. You're right, we are the African Union endorsed candidate. We secured more than 2/3 of the vote. Which is quite a high threshold, actually.
After the second vote, though?
Yes. Well, even during the first vote, we had more than a half. And because this was a nomination, that should have sufficed. That was the first critical step in terms of the journey for the campaign. Because it was a decision that said the African Union, the 54 member states of the United Nations, had decided that we would be the candidate for the African continent for that period of time. Now, the vote at the United Nations will take place in June, so we have round about 6, depending on how you count, 6 or 7 months of campaign.
Just for the layman who has perhaps been watching how you've been very keen, that is a Foreign Affairs in Kenya, to particularly get this seat at the UN Security Council, what's the importance or gain benefit to our nation?
Joining the Security Council puts us in the league of the countries that are making determinations on the most critical enabler for development, namely the pursuit of international peace and security. Now, you will know that we have a pedigree in this area. We started participating with the first United Nations peacekeeping mission. Many Kenyans might not know that Kenya was one amongst 3 nations that contributed the first UN peacekeeping mission to the Congo, to the DR Congo. And our story has been one of searching for peace across the world. We chaired the Peace Building Commission in the United Nations and have been the only country that has co-chaired that commission since it was established, because the entire world realizes the value that we bring in terms of our contribution and in terms of the doctrine for peacemaking that we bring.
It sounded more of, from a diplomatic standpoint, more of the benefit being sway in decision making. But does that translate for the nation, for the Mwananchi?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course, you will know, Mark, that there is no development that you can have without a state of peace and stability. And clearly, contributing, thinking about the levels of threats that are upon our region, for example, you require this far-away decision-making mechanism to have the nuance and sensibilities that are relevant to the real issues on the ground. And you cannot do that if you do not have an actor, a country that is intimately involved. We have built a huge capability to respond to disasters. We were one of the very few countries that contributed a contingent of capabilities to deal with the Ebola crisis in West Africa. We were among the very few countries on this continent that responded to Cyclone Aldai. We are among the countries that respond to the crisis of famine and shortage of food within the region. Our Red Cross is world renowned. So, and why do we do this? We do this because we realize the potential, realizing Kenya's potential depends on an environment that can allow us to optimize the opportunities around us. So yes, great benefit, not just to the Mwananchi, to the country, but also in terms of responding to what is a growing demand for our leadership globally.
Very attractive, even as we make the pitch to the United Nations. Someone keen on the East African community might say, whereas we are making this great pitch with our involvement in peacekeeping missions around the world, there have been instances where we seem a bit too meek and that we're bullied within the region. Take, for instance, some of the cases that are, fresh in people's minds. 2017 in Tanzania, the chickens that, were incinerated, and also the animals that were auctioned. And of course, Kenya had an issue with that. But it seems that we're bending over too much within the region.
Well, Mark, that is one view, but it is not a correct view. There's a lot of protocols in terms of regional trading. You will know that our country has been at the forefront of driving the common union, the customs union, driving integration. President Kenyatta has been a huge champion, not just for this region, but for the African continent. And the reason for this is that there is need for us to deal with both tariff and non-tariff barriers that grow our trade, because we stand to benefit more when we collaborate, when we work together, when we grow prosperity together. And yes, there have been incidences that have been unpleasant, but dealing with those incidences doesn't necessarily mean being bullish and being violent. Rather, it means that we have to negotiate and get frameworks that work for both our people.
When you actually went to Tanzania to deliver a consignment of gold that was found here by our authorities, the Kenyan authorities, and returned by you to the Tanzanian leadership, and people looking at this say, we were kind enough to do this. Not too long ago, they burnt our, yes, no room for being bullish, but that's why there's a concern that we are being bullied, and we're agreeing to just being moved about within the region.
Mark, on the question of returning the gold and the money, remember that this gold was being transited here by a network of international crime. If we are going to deal with international crime, the fundamental principle is one of international cooperation, because oftentimes the people involved in these types of crimes are going across territories. It is also important to note that if you're going to punish, if you're going to deliver justice, issues around evidence have to be brought to the court. So it was very important that we cooperated in the manner in which we did, because this time is Tanzania, tomorrow it's going to be Kenya. And so part of dealing with global international crime is to grow, not to limit cooperation, is to grow, not to limit solidarity, is to grow, not to limit information and intelligence sharing. So that is what we were doing. And it is also because we believe, and our history does prove, that we are a country that respects the rule of law.
But there's been that island that has had an issue years over time, Migingo. And the latest on that is that there is a memorandum apparently being drawn up to come to an agreement. Where are we on that?
My message to Kenyans is that we have at the top of our mind the interests of Kenyans and how this can be realized by reducing the risks they face. And in this case, part of the risk is because the resources that we are talking about are, again, transboundary resources. And we've never had a mechanism for transboundary sharing of resources, which is what we are working to negotiate, because it has to happen, because this lake belongs to the three East African countries where it is territorially.
Will it end up with the solution that it said Migingo belongs to Uganda, Migingo belongs to Kenya, for instance? Because that's what someone at the ground wants to know, the fisherman.
The fisherman must know that the boundaries, the territorial integrity of this country will never be negotiated away. I think that is very important to know. The Kenyan on the ground must also know that these boundaries are shared by communities across both countries, and therefore we have to find a way where these boundaries become soft rather than hard boundaries, and this is not just for Migingo. So the idea is really to have a framework that allows for sustainable development that is mutually beneficial to the communities across these borders. The memorandum on Migingo is signed.
Yes,
what we are working on now are the modalities in terms of the elements that constitute it's the access, the management, and the sharing of those resources. And that has to be negotiated by various teams that are.
But even as that is negotiated, it can be tolerated whenever people are
Not at all,
Kenyans
not
are.
at all. And I can tell you, anytime there has been an incident, we have been in very deep discussions with our counterparts on the other side.
Speaking of negotiations and cross-territorial agreements, disputes, there's that one that is on many people's minds. And of course, there was meant to be a hearing ongoing now. That is the maritime dispute with between Kenya and Somalia in the Indian Ocean. With the postponement, was that to buy time to build a stronger case, because we didn't have quite a strong case against Somalia in the issue that we're faced with, that is
Mark
the waters?
Masai, our case on that maritime border has been,
Yes,
and will always be strong. It is also backed by the practice, the history of practice in that area. We had deposited our demarcation of the border with both the African Union and the United Nations, so we're not worried about the case. But we are also keen, and this has been our argument, we are also keen, taking cognizance of the character of our borders, as I have just described, that we come to a solution that again is mutually respectful of the reality on the ground. Mm-hmm. And that is why we have advanced for the need for us to engage within the framework of a negotiated solution. This has been our preference, because we would rather have a negotiated solution that is mutually acceptable than have a solution that either party, and this is not about Kenya, either party, Somalia, can decide it is not satisfied with the outcome. Kenya can decide it is not satisfied with the outcome. And we think this would be a very irresponsible way to go, because we are destined to be neighbors. And we are saying, why would we approach the court, which should be the point of last resort, as the first point? This is a question. And we are saying both of us belong to organizations that have been known to have helped mediate and resolve difficult solutions, whether we are talking about IGAD, whether we're talking about the African Union, whether we're talking about the United Nations. Both of us are members in good standing.
So hopefully between now and June, out of court.
We hope so.
All right.
We think it is the cheaper, more sustainable way to go.
Are you concerned with the future of our relationship?
Not at all. The fact that we disagree doesn't mean that our relationships have fallen apart. You know, that is not the view we take. But we think that resolving this matter will put our relationship in the right trajectory. Now, this relationship is not just about boundaries. You know, it's a relationship about business, it's a relationship about our people to people. And that is why, as a country, we have not reacted in a knee-jerk way, because we understand that this is a relationship that is bigger than the boundary. We also understand that there are solutions we can find if we commit ourselves. And that is why we have remained open. I have reached out to Somalia. We have offered to engage, and we are ready to do so.
All right. And just finally, for someone who's watching the international trips that are made by the head of state and question, why is he more out of the country than within? Help us understand the benefit it has to bring to the nation.
My message to every Kenyan that is listening to this is that the president has a duty to grow the opportunities for this country and to reduce the risks that we face, you know. And those opportunities and all risks do not happen within just the territory of Kenya. You know, in fact, our prosperity lies beyond our borders. We are only 47 million by the count of yesterday. And if we are going to push to become an upper middle income country, we're going to have to attract investment. We are going to have to grow our wealth domestically. Then we have to engage with other nations.
Certainly the hope of many Kenyans that as he attracts investment, as you've said, it doesn't attract as much of debt.
There is no way you can attract investment without wishing to attract money to grow your economy. You know, it really, it's the one thing, this debate on debt and things like that, I think it's very important that it is looked at in the light of what is the debt being used for.
The concern has been as well what the debt will do to us in the future. But that's the discussion for another day.
Day.
Madam CS, safe skies as you head to New York and all the best in the campaign.
Thank you.